The Florida-Miami rivalry renews this week as the Gators visit the Miami Hurricanes. Two teams headed in completely opposite directions. We're previewing that game here, along with what to bet. We'll be talking about Carson Beck and his push for the Heisman, the freshman phenom Malachi Toney, and much, much more. Welcome to the channel. I am Ninja, joined by Josie Costigan, who once again, a perfect week last week with her picks from Florida LSU, now 6-0 with her picks on our college football preview videos this season. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're new, and let us know your favorite bet for Florida Miami in the comment section below. Josie, got to start talking Heisman odds here because your guy, Carson Beck, at some books anyway, on top of the odds board, plus 750 at FanDuel. He's second behind John Mateer at DraftKings, so shop around if you do like Carson Beck to win the Heisman. But Josie, any thoughts on this market right now? Do you think Carson Beck is worth a bet?
He is not my guy. I was judging Beck when he was 18-1, thinking that was generous to open the season. I was so far away from him. I think part of the reason Carson Beck's jumped to the top is because, like we were talking about, Ninja, like, this Heisman board's so soft. A lot of big programs, I think, are breaking in new quarterbacks, and we've already seen how shaky that can look a couple times this season. You know, Arch Manning's a perfect example. He was so hyped up as the face of college football coming into the year, and he fell flat on his face from the pedestal that we all put him on. So I think that leaves the door wide open for someone like Beck. You know, he's experienced, he's efficient. We're 3-0. I think it's less that Beck came out of nowhere and more that, like, he's thriving while the other names on the board are, like, trying to figure it out.
Do you remember a Heisman board? And I know we're only 3-4 weeks into the season, but do you remember a Heisman odds board that has looked so, for lack of a better term, underwhelming at this point?
Yeah, not really. Like we were saying too, I feel like every preseason there's always these, like, select few guys, or at least one or two, where it's like, oh yeah, well, they're obviously going to be a Heisman favorite, you know, coming off what they did last year, or, you know, they just have these high expectations. And this year I think it was Arch Manning, but he never really played, so we just put all of our eggs in this one basket. But yeah, no, this is a very underwhelming board. Like I said, I think a lot of programs are going into this change, and it's just, yeah, weird, soft. I expect it to change a lot more as the season goes on too, so I wouldn't buy into Carson Beck.
Yeah, Nussmeier was the favorite going into week 3.
Yes.
You talked about Arch Manning. He has fallen incredibly flat, getting booed at Texas games now. It's been really, really weird. But part of the reason Beck is having such a good season so far, and it's just part of the reason, but it's 17-year-old phenom Malachi Toney, 18 catches, 228 yards, and a touchdown so far. So, like, if you were looking at ranking wide receivers in college football right now, where does this kid rank?
You know, dare I say, he's probably definitely in the top 10 right now. You know, Malachi Toney's, he's the kind of kid that makes you double check the roster, because it's like, it doesn't seem real. Like, you're only 17. That makes me sick to my stomach. Miami lost, like, 4 of its top receivers from last year, so there's a big question as to who Beck was going to lean on, which is why, again, I was so far away from Beck. And Toney just kind of walked in and he's like, yeah, I've been doing this for years. 3 games, 3 straight 6-catch performances. Like you said, already eclipsed 200 yards. It's wild for a teenager. He kind of reminds me of what we saw with Ryan Williams at Bama last year, which is a name Carson Beck remembers, because if you remember, Williams lit him up. You know, just this super young guy who steps in, doesn't even blink, and just kind of takes over in, like, the big-time competition. And I think the scary part is that he's only obviously scratching the surface. You know, if this is what he looks like at 17, like, what's he going to look like a year or 2 from now?
Yeah,
Crazy.
Future is going to be insane for Malachi Toney as we move forward through this season. And we were all talking about South Florida beating the Gators 18-16 back in week 2, but then the following week, Miami crushes South Florida 49-12 as 17.5-point favorites in that one. Can we look, Josie, at that common opponent and maybe sort of get a full picture of what to expect this week? Or does that common opponent get tossed out the window because this is, after all, a rivalry game?
Yeah, these rivalry games are weird. I think history shows they don't always kind of stick to the script. But, you know, that being said, I think we can't totally ignore what happened either with, like, the South Florida opponent. Miami obviously handled them by 37 points. Carson Beck threw almost 350 yards, 4 total touchdowns. And then obviously Florida turned it over, only put up 10 points. So while that, like, rivalry factor does level things out a bit. I think the gap in how these teams handled South Florida does kind of give you a snapshot as to where they each are. I think just Miami looks more organized, balanced. Florida looks like, I don't know, we're looking for answers. Probably still intimidated by their upcoming schedule, like we talked about last week.
We've talked a few times this season about just some of the more significant venues in college football when it comes to home field advantage. But maybe one that gets lost a little bit is Hard Rock Stadium. College game day heading there for this week. Talk to me a bit about how good Miami is at home.
Yeah, they've won 9 straight there. And it's not just like they're winning, it's how they're winning. They have an average margin of victory that's almost at like 30 points. Like that's ridiculous. And for Florida, basically everything's working against them here. Hostile crowd, top 5 rival, a team that obviously thrives at home. And the Gators are 1-9 in their last 10 games when they're a road dog of 7.5 points or more. So this just seems like it's a really tough trip for them.
Now, we discussed Florida last week, of course, when we previewed Florida LSU, a game, like I mentioned, where you went 2-0 with your picks. Apart from being a great underbet so far this season at 3-0, where has it all gone wrong for this Florida Gators team?
Yeah, I think their offense is just like broken, like plain and simple. I think that like South Florida loss was just like a punch to their gut. Against LSU, we saw the same issues show up, Lagway threw 5 picks, in the run game, just like completely disappeared, 79 yards, which is their lowest total in almost a year. So there's nothing to lean on. So that's why they've only managed like 30 points across their last 2 weeks. Their offensive line is a huge problem. Every week it feels like they're just getting pushed around, and that puts Lagway in tough spots where, he's already up 6 interceptions this season, 15 in his career. So I just feel like you can't expect a young quarterback to come in, thrive if he's under this like constant pressure and doesn't even have a run game to bail him out. Obviously their defense can kind of hang for a while, but even they're being set up to fail. So if your quarterback keeps handing the ball to the other team and there's no way for, a ground attack to produce, then you're not winning in the SEC, and you're definitely not going to win in Miami.
Yeah, and like you alluded to, and like we talked about last week, the schedule doesn't get any easier for this Gators team. So there are some potentially more dark days coming up. And you've got a couple of picks for this one, and I'll get to that in a second. But for the folks at home, if you are looking for a place to bet Florida, Miami, look no further than DraftKings. New customers to DraftKings can get a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. This is for new customers only. So I'll drop a link down below in the description. You guys go ahead and sign up to DraftKings and make your first deposit, where you can get a 20% bonus on that deposit of up to $1,000. Now, the computer is expecting a sizable-ish Miami win here, around 37-28. We are looking at Miami as a 7.5-point home favorite in this one. Total is 50.5. So the OddsShark computer expected Miami to cover and the total to go over. 3 preview videos down, Josie. An unblemished 6-0 record so far. What do you like for this one?
I feel like all this Florida trash talk might catch up to me. But for my game pick, I am on the Canes at 7.5. I just feel like it feels like a no-brainer. Miami's rolling right now, 3-0, averaging 38 points a game. They've won 9 straight at Hard Rock, like I just mentioned. Again, almost by 30 points. Florida's kind of like limping into this one. Quarterback who's turning the ball over way too much. The run game still not showing up. I feel like you can just feel the air deflating from this team as the weeks go on. With Miami's balance, Beck in the air, Fletcher on the ground, who I'm going to touch on soon. I just feel like the spread feels right to me. And then for my player prop, just mentioned him, Fletcher Jr. has just been really consistent at home, averaging 77 rushing yards a game in his last 6 outings. Florida's defense has had difficulty containing running backs on the road, especially when there's like one primary one. They've allowed at least one running back to reach 60-plus yards in 4 of their last 5 road contests. So just like with how the game shapes up, I feel like I don't see why he wouldn't dominate again. I grabbed an alt line though, so I'm grabbing him at 60-plus rushing yards. I think at FanDuel they had his over-under at 71.5. Just to be safe and to keep my perfect record intact, I went 60-plus.